I never set out to battle giants. All I wanted was a clear view of the road. Some people spend their lives chasing grand visions. I've always been drawn to the quiet details, the things most folks overlook. The way a door latch clicks into place, the timing of a blinking light, the rhythm of rain hitting glass. And it was rain, of all things, that changed everything. It was October 1962. Phyllis and I had just gotten married. We were returning from our honeymoon, driving through the dark suburbs of Detroit in my old Ford Galaxy. A steady drizzle was falling, the kind that doesn't come in sheets, just enough to blur your vision, enough to make you lean forward and squint. The wipers were doing their job, technically speaking, but they moved back and forth in a mechanical rhythm that felt completely wrong. Whump, whump, whump. Too fast for the rain, too slow to be useful, and loud. It was like trying to listen to music with a metronome ticking in your ear. I remember tightening my grip on the steering wheel and muttering, "Why don't these things just blink, like an eye?" Phyllis looked over and smiled. "Blink? Yeah, not all the time. Just when they need to." She laughed softly and leaned her head back against the window. And that was it. The moment lodged in my mind like a splinter. I couldn't let it go. Even after we got home, unpacked our bags, started settling into married life, the thought wouldn't leave me alone. Why hadn't anyone made a wiper that could pause? Not just on or off, but something in between. Something intelligent. I was teaching engineering at Wayne State at the time. During lectures, I'd catch myself drifting, sketching out circuits in the margins of my notes. At night, I'd head down to the basement after the kids were asleep. That little space beneath our house became my laboratory. There was nothing glamorous about it. Dusty shelves, a cracked workbench, mismatched screws and old coffee cans. But that's where it started. I pulled parts from broken radios, washing machines, electric clocks. I studied how relays worked, how to control current over time. I spent hours testing resistors, burning my fingers on soldering irons, muttering to myself like a madman. Phyllis would come down sometimes with a cup of coffee. She'd stand in the doorway, arms folded, watching me hunch over a mess of wires and components. "What are you building now?" "A windshield wiper," I'd say, not looking up. She smiled. "Didn't Ford already build one?" "Not this one," I said. "It took a year. Maybe longer." I lost track of the hours. But one evening, sometime in late '63, I finally had something. A small metal box with wires sticking out of it, no bigger than a loaf of bread. I climbed into the Galaxy and installed it myself. Then I waited for the rain. The first real drizzle came one early morning. Gray skies, light mist. I drove down the block and flipped the switch. Click. The wiper moved. Then nothing. A pause. Then another wipe. It worked. It didn't fight the rain. It moved with it. It felt natural, subtle, like breathing. I pulled over and just sat there, watching the blade sweep across the windshield in smooth, thoughtful motions. I didn't cheer. I didn't jump up and down. I just whispered to myself, "It blinks." In 1964, I filed a patent. I didn't have the money to hire a fancy lawyer, so I wrote it all myself. Pages and pages, diagrams, claims, logic circuits. Every sentence chosen carefully. I mailed copies to myself, sealed them, notarized every step. I did it by the book. And once that was done, I began reaching out. Ford was the obvious first choice. Detroit was the heart of the American auto industry, and Ford was at its center. I called. I wrote letters. Eventually, I got a meeting. They invited me to their engineering offices just outside Dearborn. I remember that day vividly. I wore my best suit, the brown one Phyllis liked, and carried my prototype in a wooden box lined with foam. My palms were sweating as I stepped into that glass building, greeted by a receptionist who barely looked up. I was led into a conference room. Long table, fluorescent lights. 3 men in short-sleeved dress shirts with pins in their pockets sat across from me. They looked tired. One of them had a stopwatch. I opened the box, set up the circuit, and explained the system. I showed them how the timing relay worked, how the wiper delay could be adjusted based on moisture levels. I even had a small demo motor to illustrate it. Then I flipped the switch. Click. The wiper arm moved. Pause. Moved again. The room went still. One engineer leaned forward. You said it's based on the human eye? Yes, I nodded. The eye doesn't blink constantly. Only when it needs to. This does the same. It responds to the environment. They asked a few technical questions. Jotted down notes. Nodded politely. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. Would you be willing to leave the device here for testing? I hesitated. For just a moment. Then I said yes. I walked out of that building feeling lightheaded. I kept telling myself this was it. This was the moment everything would change. My invention would go into cars across America. I'd get a license deal. Maybe even a plaque. A thank you. At the very least, I'd be recognized. I told Phyllis that night at dinner. The kids were too young to understand, but she listened carefully as I recounted every word, every glance, every technical question. She smiled, reached across the table, and squeezed my hand. You did it, she said. I smiled back. I really thought I had. Weeks passed. At first, I made excuses for the delay. Maybe they were still testing. Maybe my prototype needed a few tweaks. Maybe the engineer I spoke to had to run it up the chain. Ford was a big company. These things took time. I kept the phone close. Every time it rang, my heart jumped. But it was never them. Not once. After a month, I wrote a letter. Just a short one. I hope the demonstration was helpful. Happy to provide more detail if needed. I mailed it with care. No response. 2 weeks later, I sent another. Still nothing. I tried not to show my frustration. I'd come home from work and help Phyllis set the table, ask the kids about school, tell jokes at dinner, but inside, it was eating me. I'd poured myself into that invention, trusted them, believed in something, and the silence felt louder with every day. One night, in January, I went out to the driveway to grab a toolbox from the trunk. As I shut the lid, I noticed a new car parked across the street, a brand new Ford, sleek and shiny under the porch light. The drizzle had just started, light and steady. And then I saw it. The wipers. Click. Pause. Click. I froze. No squeal. No steady whomp-whomp. Just smooth, graceful motion, a rhythm I knew too well. My rhythm. I stood there for almost 5 minutes, watching, not breathing, not blinking. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I went into the basement, pulled out my folders, the patent drafts, the handwritten notes, the diagrams from early tests. I opened a drawer and found the sealed envelope I'd mailed to myself. Postmarked, unopened, dated 6 months before that Ford meeting. Proof. I placed it gently on the table, sat back, and just stared. They had taken it. Phyllis found me there the next morning, still in the same clothes. I told her what I'd seen. She listened quietly, then sat across from me and said, "Are you sure?" I nodded. "Maybe they came up with something similar," she offered. "No," I said. I showed it to them. The timing, the delay, the circuit. I left it in their hands. She didn't argue. She didn't have to. She knew me well enough to see it in my face. Something had changed. I started documenting everything. I wrote down every detail from the Ford meeting, transcribed every letter I'd sent. I started researching patent law at the university library during my lunch breaks. I still taught classes, but my mind was somewhere else, trapped between obsession and disbelief. Other companies started releasing intermittent wipers too. Chrysler, GM, imports. Suddenly it was standard innovation. No mention of me. Not in brochures. Not in interviews. Not even a footnote. It was like I didn't exist. By 1971, I couldn't take it anymore. I filed a lawsuit against Ford Motor Company. Everyone said I was crazy. "They'll bury you in lawyers," one colleague warned. "You'll go broke," said another. But I couldn't let it go. Not just because they stole something. Because they thought they could get away with it. They thought I was small enough to ignore. I found a patent attorney who agreed to help part-time, but I couldn't afford a full legal team. So I studied. I read case law. Took notes like a student again. I built timelines, mapped out their product releases, collected ads, technical papers, anything I could get my hands on. My garage became a courtroom. I bought a second-hand filing cabinet, filled it with depositions, schematics, correspondence. I labeled everything. PRE meeting, patent correspondence, Ford timeline. My kids weren't allowed to touch the drawers. They started calling it Dad's other house. I wish I could say it didn't affect the family, but it did. Phyllis tried to be patient. She always had. But I missed school recitals. Forgot birthdays. Dinner became quiet. My mind was always in two places, the classroom and the courtroom. I wasn't angry. I was consumed. "This isn't healthy," she said one night, folding laundry while I typed another brief. "They stole from me." I replied, without even looking up. "I know," she said, "but I miss my husband." I didn't have an answer. The years dragged on. Ford's lawyers used every trick in the book: delay, deny, deflect. They said I had no proof. They claimed their engineers came up with it independently. They tried to get my patent invalidated. And through it all, I kept going. Because I had one thing they didn't: truth. In 1976, I filed a second lawsuit, this time against Chrysler. Their system used the same logic, the same pulse circuit. Another copy with a different logo. I was now taking on two of the biggest automakers in America, with no full legal team, no PR support, and no real money behind me. People said I was obsessed. Maybe I was. But I knew what was right. And I wasn't going to let it go. The strain eventually broke our home. Phyllis filed for divorce in 1980, after 27 years of marriage. I don't blame her. She'd stood by me longer than anyone could ask. But the man she married, the professor, the dreamer, the father who built toys out of scrap metal, he was gone. All that was left was the fighter. Still, I kept going. Because every time I saw a wiper move with that familiar pause, it reminded me. I made that. Not them. Me. By the time the courtroom doors finally opened, I was an old man. Older, at least, than I ever imagined I'd be when this fight began. My kids were grown. Phyllis was gone. My hair had grayed at the temples. My eyes had deep lines, not from age, but from years of staring into legal briefs and fluorescent-lit silence. But I still had the file box. The same one I'd carried from courtroom to courtroom. The same one I'd stuffed with schematics, handwritten notes, depositions, engineering articles, receipts, photographs of wipers on showroom cars. Pages were worn thin, tabs curled, ink fading. But everything I needed, everything I knew, was in that box. And they couldn't take that from me. The trial against Ford Motor Company began in 1990, 19 years after I'd filed the suit. They came with suits that cost more than my car. Dozens of lawyers, assistants, binders that looked like they'd been printed in military factories. They were organized, clean, emotionless. I came alone, representing myself. Some in the gallery smirked when they heard that. The man who invented the blinking wiper, standing against an empire, without even an attorney. But I didn't need to impress them. I needed to speak the truth. The courtroom was quiet as I took the stand. I held up my prototype, the one I built in my basement, with parts from a washing machine and a prayer. I told them how it worked. I showed them the patent, the sealed envelope from years earlier, the letters I'd sent Ford after the meeting. I showed them my notebook, my old diagrams. I told them about that rainy night with Phyllis in the galaxy, how the wipers seemed to fight the weather instead of flowing with it. And I told them what Ford did, how they had taken my idea, the pause, and buried my name, how they waited, said nothing, and let me disappear. The lawyers tried to twist my words. "Surely, Dr. Kearns," one of them said, "your design is not entirely unique. Many engineers." I stopped him. "I didn't invent the wiper," I said. "I invented the pause. That was mine. And they know it." That line made the papers. But I didn't say it for the headlines. I said it because it was true. The trial went on for weeks. I slept little. I ate less. I reviewed my notes every night, over and over, as if afraid I might forget who I was. Sometimes, I looked around the courtroom and wondered how many people truly cared. To them, it was a patent case. Numbers, diagrams, charts. But to me, it was 20 years of my life. My marriage, My children. My faith in the system. It was every missed baseball game, every night spent in a garage instead of a bedroom, every birthday party I left early to work on emotion. I had traded everything to be heard. And now, finally, they were listening. When the jury came back, I held my breath. They awarded me $10. $2 million in damages from Ford. A few years later, Chrysler settled for $18. $7 million. And just like that, I had won. But here's the truth they never tell you. Winning doesn't feel like winning. Phyllis didn't come to court. I don't blame her. The money didn't bring her back. It didn't give me back the years I'd missed, the graduations, the laughter, the small moments when life actually happens. I went home that night and sat in the garage, the same one where I'd built the first prototype all those years ago. The shelves were dusty. The tools rusted. The circuit board was still pinned to a wooden block. It hadn't changed, but I had. People started calling me a hero, a symbol, David versus Goliath. I didn't feel like a hero. Heroes ride off into the sunset. I was just a man who refused to be erased. They offered settlements over the years, quiet money, private deals. I could have taken it and walked away. I could have bought a nicer house, started over. But I always said no. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about what's right. You can steal a man's invention. You can drag him through the dirt. You can take his time, his peace, his comfort. But you can't take his truth. The pause between wiper strokes. That gentle rhythm you hardly notice anymore. That was me. And though I lost a lot, I kept the one thing that mattered. My name.
Some people fight for money. Some fight for credit. Some don't fight at all. But then there are people like Robert Kearns, a man who didn't ask for fame, didn't chase fortune. He just wanted one thing: to be recognized for what he built. Not to be praised, not to be celebrated, just not to be erased. He wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, and he paid a heavy price, one that most of us truthfully wouldn't be willing to pay. He lost time with his children. He lost the love of his life. He lost peace of mind, all because he refused to let go of what he believed was rightfully his. His invention changed the world in a small, quiet way, a blink of a wiper on a windshield. But the fight that followed, it wasn't small, and it wasn't quiet. So now we want to hear from you. Would you do the same? If someone stole something you created, would you go to court? Would you fight for years? Would you stand alone if it meant protecting your truth? Or would you walk away? For the sake of your family, your peace, your sanity? What matters more to you, your name or the people you love? Would you sacrifice your comfort for justice, even if no one else believed in you? Drop your answer in the comments. We want to know your story. We want to hear your perspective. Because these aren't just questions about the past. They're questions about all of us. If this story made you feel something, if it made you pause, then do one small thing for us. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. We share true stories like this every week. Stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us what it means to stand for something in a world that often forgets. Because history isn't just dates and headlines. It's people like Robert Kearns. It's the man who invented the pause and refused to be silenced. Thanks for being here. We'll see you in the next one.